Have a call to order. Um, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Could you lead that, Madam Secretary?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Mike Overby,
Here.
Martha Ashley is here. David Hartson. Don Clark,
I'm here.
Scott Schaefer,
Here.
Vicki Lannon,
Here.
Mark Manley,
Here.
Ray Honey. We have a quorum.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I assume everybody has a copy of the agenda. I would like to ask if anybody has any changes, additions to that agenda.
Mike, I think we ought to add approval of the minutes from February 4th.
Good point. I keep leaving that off. Yes.
I may have touched something.
And I'd like to add one other item. David Hartson is calling me on my cell phone, so let me tell him to. Well, he didn't hang on. I'd like to add an item. If Lindsay is prepared to discuss it as an item 4 under old business, there were two small grants that she was researching. Do you have an update on that you could present, Lindsay?
I can if you want. There wasn't necessarily any direction on that, but have a couple in mind that we could probably pursue. Yeah.
Okay, let's put that as item number 4. So do I have a motion to accept that consent agenda?
I make a motion to accept that.
Second.
I'll second.
Good, Scott, thanks.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so let's
And
ask
then the
for
minutes,
approval
approval of the minutes,
of the
February 4th.
minutes. Yes.
I make
Motion.
a motion to approve the minutes for February 4th.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I can't see who is in the audience. Is Regina Bonner in the audience?
We have Chief Vance and we have Lindsay.
Okay, well, maybe they can, I understand some of this item number 2, so we'll cover it as best we can. She said that she works with Rick Smith and the Cimarron Watershed Alliance, so maybe she couldn't make it. So let's, from an informational standpoint, item 1 is the defensible space ordinance that was approved by the village council. And I think also approved by the attorneys. And I sent that out as an attachment. So not that we're going to change it, but if anybody has any, it did change in format, but I think the substance of it is the same as the last one we looked at. So does anybody have any questions about that final version?
Just want to say thank you to Lindsay and Chief Vance for
Yeah.
supporting that and pushing it forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you guys for laying the groundwork for us to be able to build upon, to be able to put that into place. Without that work that you guys had done, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
We might get him to explain how are they going to approach it? What are the plans?
Right, and you're talking notifying the residents and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay, What are the plans on notifying the residents that have houses that?
Yeah, I think that our plan is kind of just to blast it out on social media, kind of get my face out into the community and just make sure that we're talking about it, and I'm sure we'll put it up on the website as well. We're trying to work on the website right now, and get
Okay.
some things going. But yeah, and showing up to events as they come up, things like that. So just making sure that people are aware of the DSO as well as how they can go about it, things like that, like putting contractors up, different things, so.
Oh, that'd be great. Yes.
Maybe a flyer in our water bill,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
that's a
that
good
would
idea.
do it.
something that points, not so much the document, but points them how to find it.
In the right direction, yeah, definitely.
Now, I'm sorry, go on.
Go ahead, man.
On getting people to help, like clearing out lots and stuff like this,
Mhm.
is there a way to stop these guys from gouging?
That I don't think is a question necessarily for me.
Mhm.
I don't know the politics around that. And, cause I mean, I'm not a landowner in Angel Fire, so,
So
Um,
expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they will raise their prices.
yeah,
So
definitely.
you're asking about contractor gouging? Is that what-
Raising prices high and,
So our plan is to post a list of contractors that are available for thinning on the website. Anybody who submits their name as being available, we'll post their list of names. They have to have a business license to operate business in Angel Fire. That's been the only stipulation placed on by Manager Weir. Otherwise, it would be between the customer and the contractor to accept a bid or not, or try to find another customer.
okay.
Unless you have some other ideas on how to stop people from gouging, I don't even know how to stop people from speeding, let alone.
I know. Make them feel guilty.
Yeah.
It'll be supply and demand.
One thing you do have available to you is there is a standard rate set by some of the RFPs that are done, like the Cimarron watershed, they do have standard rates that are set for, per acre. I think there is some flexibility in there depending on how heavy or thin that lot is, but they do have those standard rates. It's a starting point for you to be able to negotiate a contract.
I think that's what the state.
Yeah.
That these contractors get on a state approved, or they're an approved contractor with a certain rate with the state. And, so they can be easily hired, for jobs at an already predetermined rate.
Do you have a resource for that where we can look up? that
I
standard?
know Rick Smith does. I'm going to the Cimarron Watershed Alliance meeting tomorrow, and I'll bring that up. Yeah, try to get that.
That would be great.
Right,
So-
I'm thinking about showing up to that as well, so.
So maybe if we just post that standard rate as it is advertised through that, it's a good starting point for
Yeah.
negotiations.
Yeah.
I
I'd
wonder,
also get ahead of it.
I wonder if there is a somewhat of a standard language in a contract that has to do with legal liability. Let's say a contractor cuts a tree that falls on a house. I mean, does the owner have to accept that, or is that something that, I don't know, have to waive that damage possibility? You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
I know what you're saying, but it's like, with the winds we had last night. If my neighbor's tree fell on my deck, I would have gone after him. For not cutting his tree to begin with.
Yeah, I think it's all in the details of the
yeah.
contract.
Yeah,
And if they're good and they know what they're doing, they shouldn't have to hit a house.
Wouldn't,
yeah,
they won't.
yeah. I
They
mean,
should be insured.
Yeah, they
Yes.
are.
okay, if they're insured, I mean, that's clearly, the substance, I think,
Right.
Needs to be
Could I
bonded.
enter,
bonded.
Licensed, bonded and insured.
Yes,
could I interject a couple of communication points if that's okay?
Go ahead.
So we are working on getting Lindsay a budget to participate with as many of the village events that are gonna be going on this year, having all the flyers, having all the things to be there and out in person, getting her face out there, explaining the DSO, the process. The other thing that I've been working on over the last week, and it's very preliminary, but we have an opportunity I've discussed with Manager Weir. We may be able to get some local high school volunteers and or interns going that may be able to assist with some of those community outreach efforts and or inspections. We're still working on the details and what liability or insurance would come with instituting a program like that. So there are several things that are moving forward. The other one, several of you saw, if you haven't, Chief Vance was just on the Village podcast within the last week or so I saw. So encouraging people to get information there. If we need to do a dedicated DSO podcast with that, certainly something we could do. So I think you're right. Any suggestions we have with how to communicate that this is coming down the pipe, being the new DSO. There is one more, I forget the technical word for it, but this has been blessed by our attorney, approved by council, but there is one more check. I can't remember if that's Municipal League or where it is, that reviews an ordinance before we adopt it. So we're still planning on that ordinance going live April 1. So now is a good time to be planning to communicate that ordinance rolling out and being legal.
Okay, our next Fire Adaptive Community meeting is April 1st, as I recall. Yeah. Is it possible so that even though implementation is the same date, for Lindsay and whomever to kind of outline the planned, activities, if you will, through the year for communications and outreach? Just to summarize what we've been talking about, in other words.
Yeah, I'm currently kind of working with Greg at the Visitor Center, Brandon over there too, and getting some events kind of lined up and figuring that out, as well as, I'm sure I'll talk with a couple of other people maybe about that podcast, things like that, see what we can do. So I can definitely try to scram something up for you.
And again, there is money in your contract for quite a bit of that, Oh, yeah, that's another item. We need to talk about that contract, but that's another item. Okay. Very good. Any other questions about that?
Well, will you guys, the fire department, will you guys be going door to door and start reviewing property and how they stand with the ordinance?
So the direct answer to that is no, we're not gonna go door to door, but we will be available for people to request us to come out and do assessments on their properties. But we won't be doing door to door, property to property. But we'll advertise where we're available for people to reach out to us and request an assessment.
Yeah. And I would assume that the resident doesn't need to be there for that to happen either. I mean, that's, they may be on vacation or whatever, and you just go ahead and do it if they've requested it. But
At that point, if they're not there, how do you send them a notice to tell them what needs to be done?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
If they requested an assessment, then probably. the
But
fire
if they're
department
not
has the
here-
Information.
Has their contact.
Yeah, okay.
If we have their contact information in email, we can email the
Mail.
document to them.
yeah, the water bill has contact information, at least a mailing address, and I don't know about an email address.
Yeah, they'll know.
Mhm.
Suggestion: if homeowners have property adjacent to them that is not in compliance, would the fire department be willing to provide an assessment of that and send it to the property owner who is not in compliance? Because I think that's a huge problem.
I believe it'd be difficult to do without the permission of the property owner. With their permission, just like anybody else's property, we'd be happy to do that. I think it'd be difficult to do that without permission.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's a good item for phase 2.
What
Also,
happens?
depend on whether that lot was developed or not. As it reads, we're doing assessments on developed lots improved and developed lots with structures on them.
Got it.
And we're going to be discussing brainstorming phase 2 in a minute here, which I think
What happens to those places or those people who never request, just don't request anything?
Exactly. It was
they're out
all
of compliance.
voluntary right now, right?
It's all voluntary right now, and again, like Mike said, phase 2 can be discussed at a later point for what happens in next steps.
Gotcha.
And the other thing too is, at that point, if they don't want to comply, they take their chances of losing their home insurance too. And that has to be a reminder to them.
Yeah, that's a part of the communication challenge we're going to need to exercise for sure.
It is kind of spelled out in here.
Yeah, but
And, like Jake has said, for future states, for maybe 10 years down the road or whatever that is, there is, as the defensible space becomes more and more implemented, there may be a lien placed on somebody's lot if they don't comply down the road, but we have to get there first, so.
I've also been researching some things at like Santa Fe and like Taos. It's called like the good neighbor approach. Where, I mean, not saying that this is anything that we've said that we're going to implement, but it might be a good idea to do something like that where you can go to your neighbor and be like, hey, if you want to split the cost of this spinning or things like that, where you guys kind of come to an agreement and figure that out yourselves. Because I mean, at some point, there are things that we can't necessarily do, right? We can't go onto somebody's property and do an assessment if they haven't told us. And it's just better if you yourself are proactive in talking to your neighbors and things like that.
yeah.
One of the things that was spelled out, I think in phase 2 was an agreement, like if we could have a generic agreement between neighbors. Jason, want to do thinning on your Lindsay lot, and you give me permission to do thinning on your lot, and please sign this paper that allows that. And we
Sort of
can
a contract.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Okay, I suggest we move on. I think we covered that topic pretty well. So item 2 is an update on the Cimarron Watershed Alliance grants. And I thought that Regina Bonner would be here, but this is what I know, and I'd like Chief Vance and Mark Manley to comment on what they know from the Cimarron watershed. But for the phase 2, which was in essence granted in 24, unless it's changed in about a couple of weeks, they still haven't gotten any money from that contract. Whether or not it's related to all of the stuff's going on in Washington, or if the Forest Service is just slow, I don't know the reasons. Does anybody have an update on that?
Yeah, the contract with the state has not been provided.
Okay. So the money goes from Washington to the state, and the state bundles it to us.
Yeah, the state inserts itself into the process so that they can get their cut of the federal money. The feds, once they appropriate the money, they want nothing more to do with it. So the state administers the federal funds on behalf of the federal government, and the state has been very slow. And whether that's because my understanding is the money has been dedicated and can't be clawed back at this point. But if you're paying attention to the news at all,
could be.
who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I don't, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I do know that that phase 3 is still on the table, and I've been working with Rick on that application, although the Costilla application, which he began prior to ours, is just taking a lot of time. They have further condensed the space requirements in the application, and he's working on getting that one done. So he's really kind of 90%, 10% split in attention. And look, he's just one guy, so.
Yeah,
But I've continued to tell him that I'm more than happy to even help him with the Costilla application, which has nothing to do with Angel Fire or the resort, just to free up some time. Because there's things in these applications that, we just need him for. I can't do it. I don't understand the content the way he does. And he knows what needs to be hit in order for the application to be successful. We're still planning to get this application in on time. It may not be perfect. It certainly won't be as good as the one last time. But should still be good enough. And with the partnerships he's been able to secure, we should be able to get the money. Whether a check is actually written, that's a different story, and I don't have any comments on that.
Now, the deadline was the 28th of February.
Deadline's been extended.
March 14th. So
Yeah, the deadline is extended, so we've got about 10 days.
Yeah. Okay, and as far as the scope of phase 3, my understanding, and please embellish, it's focusing on the emergency exit routes, is that right?
Our application?
Yeah,
Yes.
for phase 3.
I mean, that is certainly part of it. Chief Vance can speak to that more than I can. That's definitely a part of the application and something that the village is focused on. Obviously, there's more that goes into this application. The Pueblo is a partner, and we're not going to be. We won't get this on our own without their participation.
Yeah, it's more than just Angel Fire. That's the point, right? It goes beyond our boundaries for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of hardening escape routes and that kind of thing, Chief Vance, I don't know if you want to touch on that. That is part of this application, but that comes from bottom up, not any directive from the federal government or the grant application committee.
And I'll just add on to that. And speaking about putting in our own application for this phase 3 of the grant, we determined that as a sole entity of the village of Angel Fire trying to apply for this grant, we didn't have very good chances of having it awarded. So we joined alliance with surrounding partners with the Cimarron watershed. Moreno Valley is included in that, and I don't remember the name of the pueblo that's involved with that north of us.
I think it's just I don't know the official name. I think people just refer to it as the Taos Pueblo.
That's exactly
okay.
what they refer to.
So that was one area that if we combined our efforts with other surrounding areas, we would get an automatic 15-point addition or boost. Or if we, just to say it another way,
we get
if we apply
docked
by ourselves.
Yeah, we get slammed 10 if it's on our own, and then and it's just 100-point system, and we can't even we're starting at 90 if we're just the community because of the economics, because we're so wealthy here. It's just anyway. I make the same joke every time. It seems crazy to me, but because there's a real need here, we obviously all know that. But and then the last go round, you had to score an 88 or higher to get funding at all. So we'd be able to lose 2 points, and that's it. We were out of the game, and Rick believes it's going to be even tighter this time. So we have to start from 100. Anyway,
So the only way we could do that is in cooperation with you all. Our position was that if we were going to do that, to take your recommendation from the Fire Adaptive Committee and from Mary Stuber and everybody else that's saying that our priority needs to be evacuation routes. We did have a large scale event. Let's focus on a way for people to get out of Angel Fire in case something really big does happen. And that's where we were focusing our efforts. Lindsay worked really hard on getting a map together and presented that as part of the language for that, and as well as some physical descriptors of depending on where you are, what zone you would be in and how to get out of that area. And so that's where we're placing our major focus. Even if they were to place a really large sum of money onto us, I don't know that we'd be able to spend that money just with the timelines involved and so forth. So if we do get any money, we're gonna focus that on evacuation routes.
All right,
That's
good,
great.
good.
Okay, good explanation. I don't know if you have a report on slash burning. Are we still burning in the winter here?
Yeah, I actually just got a slash report from Captain Romo. You guys should be pleased to hear that we are down to a final 3 piles in the pit.
Awesome.
I can't say enough about the work that they have done for wildland and the slash programs. Those guys have been working their tails off all winter to get that reduced. I encourage you to drive by there and take a look at it. I know I say it every time, but really, if you haven't had an opportunity, go look at that slash pit. It does not look the same as it.
Your leadership has made a difference. Can I just say that? No, I've seen it.
I
It's
appreciate
made
that,
a
but it's
difference
really been.
in their morale.
Yeah.
Those guys' morale has changed drastically since you came on.
Thank you, ma'am. It really is the effort of the team and.
I know it is.
So, but
That's,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay, next topic, new business. Discussion was recommended for one of our priority items for the committee is what should be, and it won't be answered in this meeting, but phase 2 of the defensible space ordinance, which is how does the village deal with all of the lots without structures. And I'll just throw out a thought to start the discussion. And, the vast acreage of that, is overwhelming. And so is there a phase 1 of phase 2, or if you want to call it, the most important elements? And I guess a thought I have is going back to what Don had brought up is if we knew, and this is some research, if we knew what lots with structures border those unstructured lots, and if there were some form of a code that would address, some perimeter areas, that would help an approaching fire of, coming slamming into with, wind into those structured lots. So anyone want to make a comment, a suggestion? How should we approach this?
Yeah, I'd like to just start out by right now we call this a defensible space ordinance. Now, without structures in play, we're attempting to extend this. So we need to be honest and transparent with the community. This is no longer a defensible space ordinance. It's wildfire mitigation. And I did some research, other states, Colorado, Oregon, Arizona, they focus on the wildfire mitigation aspect of things. So I think we ought to really think about that. The first phase 1 can live obviously as defensible space ordinance, and want to keep it that way. That I don't have an opinion on that, but I think everything we're about to embark on now needs to fall under the rubric of something like wildfire mitigation, fuel mitigation, something like that explain, that give, just from the bat, right off the bat, we explain to people in the community through the name of the ordinance itself what it is actually focused on, and not trying to sort of bait and switch them.
I think that's what we did kind of on this. We said phase 1 of 3, the space ordinance, but the whole thing is a fire protection.
Yeah, I just it doesn't read. We'll see how it looks when it's codified. I don't know, right? But I'm just throwing it out there, and then you might be right, and there may be no need for this. But then, Mike had just asked about sort of where can we find some natural dividing lines here. the obvious one is there is improved lots. In other words, you get a utility bill. And then there is unimproved, which is chalet 5, 6, parts of 3, way back on the eastern side. So I think, that seems like a natural way, but as Mike just said, is there a way to, split this hair even finer? I think we should talk about, improved but undeveloped that are adjacent to properties that have structures. Now, I tried to do some research on this, and again, I'm loath to provide any legal advice, right? It's not my job. I shouldn't be doing that. The committee and the village, not my client. I think that this is possible. To do this, you're making a differentiation between, the village has the ability to kind of identify risk to the community and then to take action to mitigate that risk. So if we want to introduce in phase 2, and perhaps it's phase 2A, dealing with improved undeveloped lots adjacent to developed lots that are handled in the DSO that we have currently, that may be a starting place. If we want to go there, if you just want to go straight to all improved undeveloped lots, we could do that too. But as the chairman just said, I do think that, and I'll shut up, but I do think it's important that we kind of take small steps to bring people along. This is, ever since I got here, one of the main things in my job is leaning enforcement and collection. I can tell you it's next to impossible, because folks that aren't here, unless they've forgotten about their property and they've got property in other states that can be attached through a long process of getting default judgments in place on them and then domesticating them in other states, you can't get these people's attention. And it's exceedingly expensive, and the village is not in the position of doing this, to collect, small amounts of money because somebody's out of compliance. It's a complete waste of time. So I think we've got to go all carrot and almost no stick, because the stick is just it's an empty threat unless you're talking about somebody that's got substantial assets in New Mexico, in other places. Then then it's a little easier. But when you start talking about domesticating judgments in Texas and things like that to get people to comply, it's just, I'm just telling you, it's a loser. It's a waste.
Would you expand that opinion to liens? Would liens be the same?
Yeah, so the way the lien works, right, is and the village puts liens on people's property for utility availability all the time. And it just sits there until that person goes to sell the property. And, there's realtors on this board that can talk about the sale of raw land. It doesn't, it's still, again, I think should we do that? Yeah, sure. Because then we eventually may get the money. A lot of times what happens is these people pass away and their family disclaims the property, and then the property sits in limbo because the state won't take it. And it's a problem.
It's
so
a
again,
revolving circle.
it is. It very much is, and that's the thing. Until we have a population base that can support the infrastructure, and the property values go up as a result because people want to live here, we're going to face these problems over and over again. So I would just suggest that we try to focus on bringing people along slowly and educating them. I think that the insurance issue that we've talked about a million times is critically important, and people understand that. And when it hits you directly in the wallet, not from the resort and not from the village, but the fact that your house may be, if it burns to the ground, you may get nothing, right? That kind of thing, when you explain that to people, they go, they perk up right away. And that will lead to things like you mentioned, Lindsay, about, hey, talking to your neighbor. Hey, buddy, your property is next door to mine. I can't get insurance on my house. And one of the main reasons is because your lot is a tinderbox. Can we talk about how to deal with that, right? Because as we mentioned before, there's all these issues that block whether it's, anybody coming onto a property that isn't their own and attempting to thin it. So anyway,
I just want to give a little feedback about what you said. So are you proposing that any future conversations that we have along these lines, we call it something else? Let's get away from the defensible space nomenclature and leave that to be a standalone policy. And the next thing we work on is a fuels management policy, and all conversations in the future are aimed at those developed lots.
Yeah, Chief, I mean, that's, and whether we wrap the DSO, which is phase 1, into a wildfire mitigation ordinance, I don't have an opinion on that. But I do think that everything that we do now going forward, again, we're trying to educate the community. And when I hear defensible space and it's applying to a vacant lot, I immediately go to, well, what are we defending? And so I think it's really important that we're authentic about what we're doing here. And as soon as there's no longer a structure on an improved, a lot that is developed, it's not, defensible space is too limiting at that point.
I agree.
And so I do think, because of all the things I just mentioned about the education side, the carrot, right? I really think we ought to just right from the jump, be authentic about what it is we're trying to do here. And then again, and I've been talking way too much here, but if we want to focus on improved but undeveloped adjacent lots as the phase 2.A dot, that would be my suggestion. Because again, so I think small steps, it's easier. You eat a sandwich in 2 bites, you have a problem. If you take 10 bites, you're fine. So I just
actually a great segue. I'd like to piggyback off what you said, if you don't mind, is
can we
I'd like.
define improved undeveloped?
Yeah. So
What does that mean?
So you've got improved and unimproved. Again,
It's in.
yeah, it's in the DSO,
Okay.
but improved means you get a utility.
Okay.
Developed means you put a structure on your improved lot.
So what does improved mean again? I didn't catch that. I'm sorry.
Improved means there are utilities to your subdivision. Developed means you put a structure on your improved lot.
And this is a great way of sorting properties as they pertain to adjacent structures and so forth. It's next to impossible to do that without defining them in some way. So if you look at it from a real estate point of view, it's improved, unimproved, and then developed would have a house on it, undeveloped would not have a house on
Makes
it.
sense.
By the way, that's the way we have our utility billing system set up as well. So
What
every
about,
lot is
say,
broken down into those categories.
What about the unimproved but bordering a structured lot? The
You don't have those.
We wouldn't
2A.
have.
You don't have those.
You don't have those?
No. Yeah, so the structures are on improved lots.
Okay.
In other words, utilities.
I did also want to piggyback off of what you're saying, and before we discuss whether we're gonna split these up or not, it's my preference that we have a season of slash intake to understand what kind of implications that's gonna mean to us as far as our process. If you look at the defensible space project outline that we had created early on, probably could use some updating, but one of those phase 1 expectations was 1 to 2 years. We could start working on the language for whatever our future states are gonna be, whether that's gonna be 2.1, as you mentioned, or a separate policy for fuels mitigation. But we need to see what this is gonna mean to us. One of those target goals was to have 50% of the lot compliance within Angel Fire. It might take us several years to get up to 50% lot compliance, but that's about what we're gonna need as a target to set our minds on, to be able to assess, can we process the amount of slash that's coming in? We just took off a big bite as a fire department by passing this DSO. We think clearing the pit out and having the upper area available to us is gonna be enough, but we don't know until we know. Come April 1st, we don't know how much slash we're gonna get, and that might mean too much. We're already looking at outside contractors to be able to haul away stuff or chip it or shred it as a contingency if we're not able to handle the slash. But I need to know what a year's worth of slash intake means to us, how many lots we get, how much compliance we get, and allow us on the back end to assess, can we continue to do it at this pace, or do we need to slow it down a little bit?
So we really need time.
We need at least a season to see what this DSO that we passed is gonna mean to us on the
Yeah.
back end.
Especially with Lindsay out there educating the public and doing inspections and Captain Romo doing inspections. That in itself is gonna generate interest because we've never done that before.
No.
Yeah.
And by the way, Lindsay and Captain Romo have already done some training on home assessments. They've already been out in the community and looked at a couple of properties and done that. Manager Weir himself has offered up his property to go take a look at. So, you know, we can do those on a trial basis, and, you know, maybe we get a small sample group of people that are willing to volunteer some homes to see what that would look like for their space individually. Maybe that's this panel, maybe that's a small group
What
up
if you've
front.
already done it? I had the fire department out and they did mine.
When?
Before winter. I had it done, this summer, and the only thing he said is, the wood on your house is too old. I said, never mind, it's getting stuck up.
So keep in mind, that was with all of the previous information, although our checklist hasn't deviated much from what that checklist
I'd love
was.
to have it.
But now we have Lindsay on board as well, so it might look a little bit different. The presentation might mean a little bit something different. She might look at it in a different way, so.
Yeah.
They do have a database though, so every single house that they have, done assessments on, we have everything still.
So you've got mine.
Yeah, so we have
Yeah.
yours, and we know like the exact day that they did it,
Mhm.
and pictures, things like that, so we have all that information.
Yeah, and I don't mean to imply that, you know, that the non-adjacent undeveloped lots are not important. You know, we want to move this process forward, right? It's been taking a long time. And so there's all this kind of urgency that we are placing on ourselves. Certainly, it's an important thing, but I do think we got to balance getting it right. And you know, if that means we've got to just slow down a little, I think we all probably have ideas of what does this all look like 5 and 10 years from now, right? And there's this sense of urgency that makes you want to get right to it. But I don't think it hurts us to we don't have to stop. Let's focus on the adjacent lots and see how that works. And try to work on an ordinance for that specifically and get it to council and both council, SEL and CIL, and see what they want to do with it. And in the meantime, we can, you know, we know that if we're going to do improved undeveloped adjacent lots, that the next step would be the non-adjacent lots. And we just bumped that out a little bit more. But I don't think it hurts us to kind of really try to focus on the one I've mentioned, the 2A or 2.1, you know, because there's obviously can be a 2.B or 2.2. And we just kind of keep moving along. But sometimes there's this whole scope of this thing is so big that it makes it almost overwhelming at times. And so again, we just go back to one small bite at a time. We're going to get there. And I think we will come up with something better that the community can get behind. And again, it's that tipping point, right? Of getting more and more people, bringing them along slowly so that more and more people in the community understand the threat, understand what the opportunity is, understand the insurance piece of it. And then to Lindsay's point, they start talking to each other, and then we've got this groundswell that happens. But if we try to force feed the whole thing all at once, I don't think we're going to get the result we want.
No.
Well, one suggestion for phase two would be to just help property owners that have that adjacent lot. Help them get a hold of the owner and encourage, at least just encourage them working together to mitigate that, and that might be a good phase two. And it could spell out the ramifications of not, but it may just be a note that puts the two in connection, and so that they can hopefully work it out themselves, like you said, the good neighbor thing. That might be a good initial start to phase two.
Could I suggest too, I like everything everyone has said, and I think this is the right approach. However, in the question, and it's probably not a minor effort, is identifying, and I don't know how you measure it, acres, if you will, or linear feet of the boundaries around structured lots. So we have at least a very high level initial, scope of what we're dealing with. Does that make sense?
Mike, are you saying we need to identify these properties that are,
Or at least an estimate, yes. And it maybe, I don't know, if on a map,
Yeah.
it seems to me if you're going to come up with a new, ordinance, that we need to know the impact of that too.
Could I interject, because I have some rough numbers, and please, anyone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. What I don't have will be undeveloped. I know how many improved undeveloped lots, or I think I do. That's about 1,200, but I don't know how many of those have a structure adjacent to them. That would be a little harder to source. So top line number, you have about 1,200 improved undeveloped lots. How many of them have a structure adjacent would be a much harder number to get. But to give you an idea, that's the rough number of lots in that next pool. That I agree with everything has been said before. This 2A, or whatever we want to call it, it's the next item to be addressed because it's the next largest risk.
Yeah.
You have lots next to adjacent property owners. That's where we're concerned about fire. So that's where our focus needs to be. Two other points.
Could
I would,
someone scope that out? And I don't even know what that means other than a big map, and try to locate those 1,200 and then look to where they are.
Well, we have in our utility building by address. We actually just rolled out or our P&Z department in conjunction with our utility department. Maybe even you contributed too, didn't you? To that new mapping system that shows where all the water lines are and everything. So I think in that it actually shows that is a map system online, and it actually shows which houses have meters and which ones don't. So we can assume if you don't have a meter, it's unimproved or undeveloped. I get them.
I know.
So I think identification is a key component to this. And I think with that new mapping system, it's going to make it a lot easier so we don't have to drive around and look.
One thing I'll mention about that, sir, is that there are various levels of your ability to view what's on that website. At a public level, there's a very cursory view, but you can't get information like who the lot owner is, et cetera. You have to have certain credentials to be able to view all of the information. So it may be limited.
So we'll just need to have, figure out which lots we want and have Santos go pull that data out of that. system, or we can actually have Audrey pull it out of utility billing if we have addresses.
And
Because
then-
that's gonna have whatever information they provided us. I will tell you, it's illegal for us to give anything other than name and address. We can't give email accounts or telephone numbers to the public. So we have to be conscientious of that.
Yeah, this, that information is available at the clerk and recorder.
Yeah.
Not email or phone numbers.
Just name and address.
Yeah, and like the address that they put on file when they filed the record.
Yeah, a lot of our addresses aren't right.
Yeah,
We know that.
yeah,
Like I said, we have 500 to 600 accounts we could foreclose on today.
yeah,
And a lot of it's because people move and they don't update their address with us, or they
Right.
sell the property and they don't go, they don't notify us that they sold it to somebody. And so our records are only as good as the data people give us.
So one of the things, if we are gonna kind of focus on these adjacent lots, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, the numbers don't come to mind, but those zones that come out from the structure, what is the widest arc? Do you all remember? 200?
Yeah, it's 100 feet, but with slope, it can continue out to 200, maybe even more, depending on like
Right,
how much that is, but like mostly, like for most of the lots that we look at in Angel Fire, especially down over here, not necessarily the chalets up there, it would be about 100 feet.
okay.
Yeah.
So for the
Yeah,
most
of
part,
yeah.
that's only gonna be the actual adjacent lots, but some lots are quite skinny. And it could be the next lot,
Multiple.
yeah,
Yeah, like my house is
Yeah.
10 feet from my neighbor's lot.
right,
So it could go out 90 feet into his lot.
yeah,
You
Yeah.
know?
If it was like a
But then
80
if
by
he's-
72 half acre lot, then it could go to the next lot.
yeah, could go to the next
So
lot.
Scott, the other thing is, if he has, if he's developed or he has a structure, then there's gonna be overlap of your two zones.
Right, yeah, in that case, you'd probably be okay, but then what's on the next side, on this, what happens when you get to the property line where there's no structure? And if that's a skinny lot, it's 75 feet. Then you've got, and if you're at your 10 feet, then you're 15 feet into the second lot that is adjacent. We
This
just-
is an example of many of those gotcha points
Yeah.
that we kind of just internally, we decided. When we define something like this, it's probably 1% or less, or 5% or less, like, let's just go ahead and
Sure.
just put that one
Yeah.
off to the side. Let's try to triage this and do
Yeah.
the most good for the most lots. I think, nobody's gonna be perfect, no law is gonna be perfect,
Yeah.
but our general intention, if we're able to cover 90% of the lots out there, we're just gonna avoid those
Yeah.
gotcha points.
So the question is, if we're gonna focus on this, 2.1. What is it we're trying to do with the adjacent but undeveloped lot? Which is to get them to bring it essentially into compliance with phase 1 of the DSO.
That's our next
I would think,
question.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's-
I think that's pretty easily defined. It would depend on how close it is to the adjacent
Yeah.
structure.
Sure,
And so if they're in the intermediate zone for the adjacent structure, we would have to apply that same logic to that adjacent lot. If they were really close to the lot line, like a 10 foot away from the lot line, and they're in the immediate zone, then they
Yeah.
would apply to that. Just that radius boundary is what we would be looking at. So I think it's pretty straightforward. And kind of taking what you said, identifying neighbors that are present, trying to get a hold of them, but also having a good neighbor agreement between two parties that is just that generic agreement that I can present my neighbor with that gives me permission to thin on that lot to create my own defensible space for my home. I think that's where our first area of focus would be. Yeah.
So when you do, like you come to my house, you do an assessment and you see, okay, I need my neighbor to work on his lot to get me into compliance. Can that be tagged on your computer program, that lot is one of them that needs to be contacted
Yeah.
for phase 2?
I want to make a correction. We don't have a computer program that allows tagging, and because there are programs out there, and I Flow NSP was one that we used to have that we got rid of because it was purchased by Image Trend, and that's a whole other conversation for pre-fire planning. But what we can do is make notes to yours, if we're out doing your property, we can make notes to your assessment that says the neighbor adjacent. Hopefully we can yell across the lot line and say, hey, would you mind if we do an assessment for you? Hope, you know, maybe if you can arrange that with your neighbor, if you had good communication with them,
Right.
that would be ideal.
But I'm just looking for some resource for you to go back to after this first phase.
Yeah.
You know, some, that gives you a good list
Yeah.
of all of them that we need to start working in. Right.
Again, I think this is one of those things, where do we concentrate our efforts and where do we, I can tell you, like, one of the things that we just implemented, the short-term rentals, fire inspections, we've already gotten at least 20 of those, and each of those requires time and dedication to review, make sure that the evacuation plan is done and so forth. So again, it's just a matter of resources from that point. I think, my response to that, in future states, yes, it'd be ideal to be able to identify and tag those lots that are next to the lots that we have done that are requiring assessments as well. But in the beginning phases of this, I think we're gonna have a really hard time keeping up with what we just bit off. Trying to eat a sandwich in 1 or 2 bites
Yeah.
would be difficult for us. That's a great idea. I just don't think we're prepared to be able to take that.
Oh, no,
Take
it's
that.
like I've been working on my neighbor every time they come up in the summer. I just go, you know, really need to get that checked if you want to keep your insurance.
Or, you know, Lindsay Reed is really nice and resourceful.
That's
Have a
right.
conversation
Maybe
with
she'll
her.
come out and talk to you.
Good idea.
But
I've been
honestly,
doing that. I've been working on that since I got mine done.
yeah, but honestly, I think having a face and a name to that program and being able to just kind of have polite conversation about it and just
Yeah.
educate the public, I think we're gonna make a lot of strides into it.
You are.
I have a question. Are what we're calling unimproved lots, like the membership lots
Yes,
that have no utilities in the vicinity? Is that
that's right.
Undeveloped, yes.
undeveloped? Okay,
No, unimproved. Unimproved.
unimproved. Okay,
Improved
improved means that
Improved or unimproved means you get a utility bill. Or you
Okay.
don't.
if you have utilities pulled to the neighborhood but not onto the lot, are you still considered improved?
Yes, because you're, if they're available, you're getting a bill.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
don't know what lots
availability. Okay,
I don't think that exists.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, there aren't any like that.
Yeah, I think well, I mean, the only place that might exist would be, even that doesn't really fit, but the lots like on the west side of town that go up towards, the Carson and the Girl Scout Ranch, there's some large lots over there that don't have, they're really unimproved because there's no road to them for the most part. But
I can't think of what those would be.
you don't know what I'm talking about, like the lots behind Zeb's and behind,
Oh.
there's some lots back in there that are,
They have no
Um,
utilities.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
they're out of the
Yeah.
resort, so
Yeah.
you would know about them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But there are
They're in
lots
the
up
village.
there and they have no roads to them or
They're in
anything.
the village, just
Yeah,
not.
they're in the
resort.
village.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
So those, to me, they're unimproved.
right.
And then within the resort, all the subdivisions are either improved or unimproved for the whole subdivision.
Yeah.
There's no partial subdivisions
Yeah,
that are unimproved. So I don't think we run into that too much. I mean, it's gonna be extremely rare.
yeah.
So does an improved lot that doesn't have a structure, they don't get a water bill, right?
Yeah,
They get a quarterly bill.
Yeah,
Do they also get charged that?
or if it's a big lot, it's biannual, but it's either quarterly or biannual.
And do they get charged that
Or
monthly
semi-
wildland fee?
Sorry,
yep,
biannual.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Although they may not pay.
Right.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
Well,
Okay.
I think we're out of time, team. So, could, Madam Secretary, far as the agenda for the next meeting, we are going to continue this discussion on the phase 2A, one, whatever. And to help us with that, if I remember the discussion, we're going to try to bring forward the number of lots that are impacted, if that's right. What other activities are we going to discuss in this next meeting?
That should be it. I think we just need to get that information in terms of IDing those lots. And that would come through the village. We can't see that, but
Yeah,
Well, I could give you names and addresses
that's all.
or locations on a map.
Locations is really
Yeah.
how
I
many.
just can't give you phone numbers or emails.
Anything else we need to specify in that next meeting? That's
Well, we might talk about some of those smaller grants in that next meeting.
yeah, I think so. We'll get an update officially, hopefully from
No reason to leave money on the table.
no, just
Cimarron Watershed and also from Lindsay on any small grants.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, officially meeting is ended at,
Gotta make a motion.
yes.
I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
I
Okay.
heard it.
Favor?
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
I have a comment.
Sorry,
Hey.
we're done.
I want to thank everybody who's done really excellent research and presented very cogent discussion points. I sincerely appreciate all that.
And pray for that money
Right.
not being cut off by the dozers. Okay.
Yeah, right now I'm kind of like working with Romo to try and figure those things out. Because he's the one that's usually doing assessments. I don't think I'm confident enough to go out there on my own just yet. Yeah, I can definitely, if you want to email, do you have my email?
I can write